Get ready to get sticky. Sticky Situations is sponsored by Corona Crush. Corona Crush is creating Jewish couples always. Join the Facebook group. Just search Corona Crush and look out for virtual speed dating events happening every other week. They're 100% free and 100% Jewish. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Sticky Situations. I'm your host, Rachel, which obviously you already know because I'm unforgettable. Everyone, go, whatever platform you're listening on, go give us a 5-star rating. If the platform allows for it, give us a glowing review. Go follow and like us on all the socials. Go like Sticky Situations Facebook page. Follow Sticky Situations Pod on Instagram. Follow Sticky Situations Pod on TikTok. If you would like to be a guest on my podcast, please send me a DM at Sticky Situations Pod on Instagram, or you can send me an email at stickysituationspod@gmail.com. I also have links to applications in all of my Corona Crush posts and somewhere in the socials. But again, if it's just easier, you can send me a DM, send me an email. I want to hear from you. I want to have my listeners on as guests. So reach out. Same goes for if you would like to date any of my single guests. Reach out to me. I'll see if I can make something happen for you. You all know that I want to be a shotgun, so let's try. Okay, everybody. We have an extra special episode today, so we're just going to get into it. Please welcome my friend Robert to the podcast. Robert, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. How's everyone doing?
Thanks for being here. Funny story. This is the second time that Robert and I were supposed to record. And I told him I would say this. Probably
I
about
deserve it.
he definitely deserves it. He stood me up the first time he was supposed to come record, which was like, honestly, by the time you're hearing this, probably almost 2 years ago. He did text me. I did actually have a situation where a podcast guest like just stood me up and ghosted me, and I'll tell you that story eventually, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, Robert texted me like 5 minutes after he was supposed to be at my apartment to record that he wasn't coming. So then a year and a half later, I was like, "Oh, you want to?" We ran into each other, and I'm like, "Oh, you want to come on the podcast, and actually record this time?" And here we are. So, Robert, I'm glad you showed up this time.
I apologize, and I apologize again, and I
He
did
did. He
apologize
did.
profusely. And I guess evidence shows that I'm back. I'm on the podcast and
Yeah.
and came. So I hope I redeem myself.
He was forgiven a long time ago. I just like to bring it up because,
Thanks. I deserved it. But okay, I'm
yeah.
here now.
He's
So
here
here
now.
now, ladies
So
and gentlemen. Let's
so
move on from that.
so we're excited. Okay, Robert, before we get into the episode, can you just tell me and my listeners some basic information about yourself? Can you tell me your age, location, relationship status, and religious denomination?
So age, I'm 30. 35 rather. Whoa, I want to be 30. I'm 35. I just turned 35. So yeah, wow, that's the big number that I'm wrapping my brain around. So I'm not used to that saying that. But yeah, 35. Location, New York. Born and raised in New York. Relationship status, I think that's what you're asked.
Yeah.
I'm single, and the last one was religious denomination. So I'm gonna say Jewish Orthodox light. I don't know if that's a real. I would say modern Orthodox light. Some people
Okay.
say modern Orthodox Machmir. I'm
Yeah.
modern Orthodox light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Robert. So, guys, Robert told me he has a crazy story, and I was at it. Were you going to tell it at a Shabbat table? And I was like, don't tell it because I want you to tell it on the podcast.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I've been waiting for this.
2 years in the making.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have a lot of different dating stories, and just I guess look, I've been dating for like a long time, I guess, and I was more Orthodox when I was younger, so I did more of your traditional like blind date setup matchmaker type. And as I got less religious, I probably have done different kinds of dating. But I'm gonna pull from this is from old stories. Any of the characters that I'm naming, I'm not gonna say the real name. If I mention the name, it's a fake name. And most of these people are probably married already with like kids and stuff. So anyway, and I'm going to leave it ambiguous enough that I doubt that it would be, I think, impossible for anyone other than maybe the person themselves to know who I'm referring to. So Uh, that being said, all right. So this is a long time ago. I remember I got set up with this girl, and I thought she was very attractive. I was really excited to go on a date. I remember it was far away. I had to drive like, I mean, it was far. Like the whole driving situation, I probably drove like 5 hours. I mean, I'm not one of those guys telling you like, oh, lazy, I don't want to drive, from Manhattan to Brooklyn. I mean, this was far. We went out. I remember I picked her up, and when I got there, so at that time I would meet the parents. So I don't know your listeners what their backgrounds are, but in the more Orthodox world, you meet the parents on the first date. Like just briefly, you sit down, you have like a nice little chat, and then you go on the date, and that's normal. So I knock on the door. The father opens the door, sits down with me, has a conversation. Super sweet guy. I mean, like super nice guy. We had gone to the same elementary school, and he had been there, 30 years before me, but we had like a really nice conversation. Some of the rabbis were still there and stuff. So we knew a lot of the same teachers, and it was just funny. He was asking about the area and things have changed and super nice. And his daughter comes down, and I hear, "Shut up." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" I thought she was talking to me. And then I realized she's talking to her dad. And she says, "Yeah, no one wants to hear your crap." And I was just like, yeah, like this is an Orthodox. So just understand, this is like a more Orthodox girl from like a more religious background. And I'm embarrassed for like the dad. Even he's embarrassed. I was like, what is going on here? Now, I'm just in shock right now at this point. And by the way, one of the most attractive people, not that it matters, but one of the most initially before when I just saw her, like objectively, she was one of the most attractive girls that I've ever gone out with. By the end of the date, I didn't think she was attractive in the sense that, yes, I think she was pretty, but like she wasn't attractive to me because, as you'll see. So we walk outside, and I'm just like, this is so weird. Anyway, I changed the topic. We start talking about something else. She's walking over to my car, and she goes, I'm a car person. That's what she tells me. And I'm like, okay. And she goes, yeah, I know cars. And she looks at my car and she goes, what is this? A Bentley? This is a Bentley, right? And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this person has like the most like no social norms. I don't know. It was so interesting to me because I'm thinking either A, you know cars and you know what cars are, so you know what a Bentley is, and isn't that like weird to just why are you bringing that up and saying this is a Bentley like ostentatious? I don't know. Anyway, like why would you just bring that up? It's kind of weird.
Was it a
This was
Bentley?
not what do you say? It was not a Bentley. I'll just go with that. It was a
Okay.
Hyundai. It was a Hyundai. Okay, a Hyundai, however we pronounce it. Not a Bentley. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, you're not only are you rude to your parents, but you're also an idiot. Anyway, we get into the car, we start driving, and the conversation is just it's just terrible. I mean, it's fine. I can, as you can see, I talk a lot, and I could talk to a wall, and I'm trying to make conversation. She's okay, and she's like kind of participating, but not that much. And like could tell that she maybe didn't really want to be on the date. I don't know. And I just, trying to make some jokes and talk about whatever and ask her questions about herself. And, I figured that she would be into that. And she was and talks about herself and fine. Okay. Well, we get to the restaurant. Restaurant's actually no longer around, but it was a great restaurant in New York City. And we sit down, and I'm remembering more of the story as I'm telling it. The people sitting next to me, the tables were really close together, and it was a great restaurant. I remember it's like an Asian fusion kosher restaurant. It was really good. It was called I think it was called Prime KO. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names on the podcast, but anyway, it was a great
Sure,
restaurant
it
in the
doesn't
city.
it doesn't
Yeah, it's
exist
it's closed
anymore.
anyway now. It's closed, but it was a great restaurant, and I had been there a lot. I sit down, and 2 minutes later, the table next to us is like my family's friend, like my one of my good friend's parents,
Oh
and they're
no.
like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing, Robert?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And they're sitting so close that they can hear our conversation, and it's awkward because number one, it's awkward that they're listening. Number two, it's going really poorly this date, and so they're thinking like I'm a really bad date. It's going bad anyway. It's going poorly. It's going really badly. So I stand up, and I remember going to the bathroom, and the restaurant had two stairs. You can go like the way that patrons would go downstairs to get to the restaurant. It had two floors. We were sitting downstairs, but you could take this other staircase that was really meant for waiters when you were going to the bathroom, and she wouldn't see. And I end up running around to the other side of the restaurant. I go to the waiter and I tell him, like, look, this is a terrible date. I don't know if I should be telling this to your listeners, but I tell them like, look, this is a terrible date. Like, just bring out the food whenever it comes. Just bring it out, and then like bring out the check. Like, let's just do this like one, two, three. It was one of my fastest dates. It was embarrassing for me to be on that date with the neighbors listening. I think the whole date was probably it was like a half hour drive to get to the city from where she lived, maybe an hour. And we only stayed in the restaurant for maybe like I would say 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. I ordered a roll of like I ordered sushi. She ordered sushi. She didn't order anything else. Or like I don't know. Meaning I asked her. She ordered first. She ordered a roll of sushi, and I think I was hungry, but I ordered like two rolls of sushi, and that was it. Like one of those fancy whatever kind of good rolls, but like which comes out in like 2 minutes. We ate our sushi. I asked her if she wants dessert. She said no. Tea, coffee, nothing. No, she didn't want anything else. She had said she wasn't so hungry, and there was no conversation. We got up, walked out. That was it. It was super quick. We get back, we're driving the car. I mean, there were moments of silence, like, and I could talk to a wall. There was just silence in the car. It was terrible. I asked her. I'll give you an example. I asked her like, so what do you do for fun or like anything, any hobbies? And she's like, no. I'm like, and I think I said to her like, I love skiing and going down the mountain. It's just awesome and the feeling of like flying. And she's like, I hate skiing. It's so stupid. It's like sliding down a mountain on two pieces of like sticks, like, and it's cold. Like, why would you pay money for that? Granted, I just told her that I love skiing. And then I think I changed to like, oh, well, what about the beach? It's awesome running on the beach in Miami and like so nice, the sun. No, it's stupid. She doesn't like the sand. She doesn't like swimming. I then switched to sports. She doesn't like sports. I switched to museums. She doesn't like museums. Music, no, nothing was hitting. So I said to her, what do you do for fun? Like, or what do you do other than work? And she said she watches TV, and I was like fine with that, which is a fine response, right? No, but and I was ready to like start talking shows, and then she goes, no, 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 I don't watch shows, I don't watch movies, and I'm thinking, okay, you literally have the worst answer. What does that mean? I didn't say that to her, but I said I'm thinking that. And I said, okay, so if you don't watch shows, so I'm thinking that's the worst response that like you possibly could have had. And she says, no, no, I don't watch shows, I don't watch movies, I watch like commercials. And I'm like, wait, what? She's like, yeah, no, I flip around and whatever's on, like I just like have it on. And I'm thinking, okay, you officially have the worst response. Sorry, not that there's a bad answer to that, but that's a pretty bad answer. So the date was, I thought, really bad. And then this part, I probably should leave it out, but I'll say it anyway. I'm incriminating myself. But when we got to her house, one more thing happened. Sorry, let me go back a second before I incriminate myself. Just in my defense, what bothered me talking, and I realized she was putting in like basically no effort. Like I obviously like put in some effort, right? Meaning I drove to pick her up, took her to the city. So that was like a three or let's say a 4 hours of driving, 5 hours of driving. So I made some commitment in terms of time to pick this person up, go on a date, right? I mean, everyone kind of commits to some kind of social contract in the sense of like if you're going to go on a date, even if it's not good, like a little bit. I think most people, okay, you don't have to lead the person on, but like even if you don't like me, you don't like the way I look, you don't like my personality, you could just make the night somewhat enjoyable. She was not doing that at all, right? Like it was fairly patently obvious she did not want to be there. And so I actually said to her, I kind of broached the topic, I thought in like I don't know, some kind of way, and basically gave her an out. And what came up in the conversation was that essentially told me that she had a boyfriend and that her parents basically like forced her to go on dates. And that kind of made more of the story make sense why she told her dad to shut up, which I still think is weird. I'm that guy who's wasting my time because this girl has a boyfriend. So
So
I was
wait,
a little bit, yeah, yeah. Good
did
now, you
she
can
tell
ask.
you did she tell you anything about this boyfriend? Like, why
Well,
were her parents still making her go on dates if she had a boyfriend?
keep in mind, I drove like 4 hours, and then this is like a half hour left of the drive. Meaning, so a half hour. Let's say the city is an hour from where she lives. So halfway into that drive on the way home, so I'm almost back. You know, this is, and I said to her, so we broached the conversation, and she then opened up to me, and and she essentially told me like, hey, and this she was actually more talkative about. She's like, yeah, no, she has a boyfriend. Parents don't want her to marry him, so they like I said to her like essentially she has to go on real dates. and if it doesn't work out, then she can marry her boyfriend, which she ultimately ended up, I believe, marrying. I think I heard that she ended up marrying her boyfriend, or I saw on Facebook or something.
Like, was her boyfriend not religious, not Jewish?
No, I think it was Jewish. I don't know what the reason. Maybe I don't think we got into it. It was just I think her. She just told me like, yeah, my parents don't like him or don't want me to marry him,
That's so
and
interesting.
yeah, and I was like, oh, great, yeah, great. So you're okay. Thanks for wasting my time. That's what I was thinking in my head. But and so
It actually it makes everything make a little bit more sense. And like she isn't just a psychopath, but
fair. And so, but here's the thing, like, dropped her off. I said something like, "That was horrible, eh?" And she looked at me and she goes, "What did you just say?" As if like, and I was just like, "Oh, nothing." Like, "Oh, have a great night. Nice chatting with you." And then the weird that I thought was weird. I mean, it was weird. I guess I said that, but I was like, "What do you want from me, really? Like, you didn't try at all. Like, this is clearly not going to go out again." And the person that set me up, the shotgun, was like, he kept. Sorry, she kept asking me like she kept essentially saying like, look, she said to me, you have to go on another date. Like you can't just go on one date. That's why you're single. And like she got like really like me. I felt attacked. It's like pushing the point of like, why am I not going out with again with this girl? And I didn't want to say anything. I didn't think it was my place necessarily at the time. And I just if she's not for me, I just say no and move on. Like it's not my place to like quote unquote give feedback. Maybe if someone I don't know, like no, like it's I don't know, it's not my place. Let it come from somewhere else. Like I don't want to be that person. Just if it's not for me, it's not for me. Like it's one date, whatever, right? No harm, no foul. Just move on with my life. But the shotgun kept like pushing me as to like why, and I was like, look, I think you should talk to the girl, but like I'm confident that she doesn't want to go out again. And I think this person told me the shotgun said like she wanted to go out again, and I thought it was so strange. I'm sure it was her parents forcing her, but and I was like, yeah, no, thank you. But anyway, that's one of my weirdest ones.
oh, that's a really weird one.
I don't know if that was a little
So
too
wait, do you
long,
think
but
do you think she actually just watched commercials or she was just trying to make herself seem weird?
that's funny. I didn't think about that. I mean, I think her personality was a little. I mean, for me at least, was a little bit more interesting. But I do think that, yeah, I do think that she was. Now that I'm thinking about it, because well, I could say this because I didn't use my last name, but I think I'm Facebook, and I have like 1,000 or 2,000 Facebook friends. So I guess I could say it. I think I'm Facebook friends or with her. Or I used to be Facebook friends with her, and her account like over the years kind of looked normal. So I don't think, meaning she posts kind of normal stuff. She never posted anything that at least to me, that was seemed normal. So yeah, maybe she was just trying to just be like not. I don't know. But why would you say that? Like even if I don't know, what you're purposely trying to be weird. What I mean, like what's your end game?
I don't know. I've never done it, but it's an interesting concept.
Maybe she wanted me to say no so that her parents would let her date that other guy. I guess so. I don't know.
I don't know. It's so weird.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had other girls do weird, what I think is weird stuff. Like I was on a date and a girl, she sat down, ordered 5 Diet Cokes, which okay, not socially normal, let's just say, right? I think most people would be like, that's weird. And so the
Yeah.
waiter like, bring two. And as soon as I finish the first one, just keep bringing them. But like, just I'm ordering 5 right now. Just keep bringing them. Just let's just keep this rolling. And I just thought it was funny. She did other stuff like, and then later she told me I asked her about it because I became friends with her. She actually married one of my friends, and I asked her like way back then, like when we went out, were you doing that purposely? And she's like, yeah, like she
To
was just
just be
testing me.
weird?
No, she was testing me to see. She was testing me. I mean, I know what she was saying, but she wanted to test me.
Test you for what? To see if you would say anything?
Yeah, like okay, so that she did that. She ordered like a steak for two for herself. She ordered a bottle of wine and like other things to like to ensure that like I would be okay if she was spending more money. I think that was her logic.
I still think that's weird.
Okay.
Like, how did you feel about that?
um, at the time, I mean, I had just started dating when I went out there. She was like I not just, but she was one of the first girls that I dated, and so this is a long time ago. Um, did I think it was weird? I mean, I was like, is this what it is? I don't know. I guess. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I guess she wasn't a weird person. She did it in like a funnier way, and like she's a normal, to me at least. I think a relatively normal person and like a cool girl. So like it was just funny. I thought it was a little bit odd, these couple things that she did. Like, yeah, like I don't know, I've been out to dinner before. Most people don't order 5 drinks. She ordered like a bunch of different desserts and stuff. I just thought it was like, okay, maybe she grew up like the way that she grew up, and like she doesn't really like, I just, yeah, I did think it was weird. Like, obviously, you're on a date. Not like, I actually remember where we went. We went to La Marais, and I remember, and this is going back a long time. I don't think I took a credit card with me. I think I just brought like a bunch of cash, thinking
Oh
that it would
no.
be enough. Yeah, and I mean, she ordered. Okay, she ordered the steak for two. If you know La Marais, like they have one of those huge steaks. For it's meant for two people. Like on the menu, it says steak for two, whatever.
Yeah.
She ordered that for herself. She ordered she ordered a bottle of wine, expensive, like not a cheap bottle of wine, like a more expensive bottle of wine. She ordered a salad. She ordered a soup. She ordered like a whole bunch, like 2 or 3 appetizers. I remember she ordered, I think 4 or 5 desserts. I mean, it was intense. It was. I'm not just
How
being like,
much was
oh,
the
she.
bill?
It was a lot. I think it was, and this is going back more than 10 years ago. Like this is like 13, 14 years ago. It was like a couple. It was hundreds. It wasn't
Yeah,
like,
it has
yeah,
to
it was a lot.
be.
Yeah, like it's nowadays money. I don't know. It would be like a grand. It was a lot.
Yeah. And you just like didn't say anything to her?
Again, I had just started dating. She was nice. In general, she was nice, and I think I mean, I don't know. I thought that that's what dating is. I don't know. I guess
Did you go out with her again?
so not to give too much detail, but yeah, I went out with her twice. But in my defense, I knew that it wasn't a thing even before we went out. And again, she's super normal, super nice. At least for me, like I consider her like a normal, nice girl. She just whatever that means, right? Normal's relative, but I knew she wasn't for me when we spoke on the phone. I wasn't feeling it when we first spoke. I just realized like this is not someone I don't like. I don't know. I think you get a vibe right away, and then you go on a date.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know how that works. So funnily enough, so I think this is funny, but I didn't know how like dating really worked for like the Orthodox Jewish world. And so when we first spoke on the phone, I spoke to her for like an hour. It wasn't like a 5 minute call, and I told my parents who were setting me up at the time, yeah, no, she's a great girl. I just don't think she's for me. Like I don't want to go on a date. My parents were like, that's not how it works. Like you already agreed to go out with her. And I was like, what? I thought it was like to have a phone call. I thought that the way that it worked with blind dating was that you have a phone call, that you get set up, you agree or you don't agree to have a phone call. You have a phone call. If it doesn't go well, then you don't have a first date. I didn't realize that it was like, no. You agree, the phone call is just to set up the date. I didn't know that that was a thing. Is that which I don't think is a crazy like mistake to make if you don't know about like
No.
dating. Yeah,
Honestly, like I would say no. And like maybe I don't know if I've ever said no after a phone call like from a setup. I definitely have after like a phone call from like dating apps or from like
right.
Y Connects. But like I feel like it you can tell sometimes that it's not a vibe,
Yeah, I
even
mean, I
from
spoke to her
five
for an hour.
minutes.
But I'm saying
Yeah.
certainly for like 45 minutes or a half hour call, that's kind of like a date. And so I thought, okay, I'll give more. The girl came from out of town. So to answer your other question that you asked before, which I kind of like didn't really answer. I did think it was weird somewhat, but the girl had flown in to go on the date. More of the
Oh,
story, and I didn't know that. They told me like, oh, she's coming in anyway, for like a wedding or this, but it turned out I had found out before I went on the date that she flew in to go on the date. So in my head, she could order whatever the hell she wants. Like if the girl flew in to go on a date, you got to take her out nicely,
yeah.
and
Okay. Okay.
does that
I
make more
hear.
sense? Yeah, so I was
Yeah.
like, all right, whatever it is, right? I mean, I think that that's fair. I I do think that people underratedly, I'm purposely diverting to more to other topics, but I think girls, like guys will complain about spending money on dates, but I think girls actually, some girls will spend money getting ready for a date, maybe even more than what the guy spends on the actual date. And I think guys don't necessarily always appreciate how much effort and money and time girls spend on getting themselves sometimes ready to go on a date or getting to the date or whatever it
Yeah.
is, right? Like I know girls have Ubered to, whatever, if the guy's not picking them up, they'll spend $150 on an Uber, right? To get to wherever they need to be.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate you recognizing that because, again, I also don't think a lot of guys recognize that, and I think a lot of guys have certain expectations about girls' appearances, and they don't realize that stuff is expensive. Stuff is time consuming. So, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, I'm not suggesting that girls have to do that or should do that or whatever, but I think if a guy is going to complain about like this, like you're saying, like fact on the ground is I think that a lot of girls do some of those things, and and like you said, it's time consuming, it's expensive, and I just think that you should always try to look at what the other side is. The same thing, girls should also look at the other side from a guy's perspective. Like I think it makes you a better person. I'm guilty of not
Yeah.
doing that, and I think we should try to do that more.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I'm
anyway.
also I'm not the girl who orders like 100 things and is gonna cost like hundreds of dollars on a date.
That's I always think that's interesting from like a girl's perspective, what that's like going on a date. I kind of see it myself if I go like on a business like dinner where I know the other person's paying for it. But in that
Mhm.
case, typically the guy or girl that I'm going out with for work, they're really not like paying out of their own pocket. Normally
Yeah.
it's like a corporation that's paying for it and they just, are putting it on the company card, but they're not really paying for it. I find that interesting. But
Yeah. I
anyway.
don't know. Like I haven't talked to so many other girls about this, which is interesting that I haven't. For me personally, I'm always uncomfortable spending someone else's money. So I like to like stay on the side of caution. Like if we're going for drinks, I'm gonna have one drink. Unless the guy's ordering a second and like it's kind of like, okay, we're staying for round two. Like I'm never gonna be the one to be like, oh, should we get round two? And if I get taken out to dinner, I usually ask the guy what he's gonna get and then try to like match around what he's
Oh,
getting.
interesting. I think that's. I mean, I'm sure guys do appreciate that, or I think that's very thoughtful or considerate of you. I mean, well, wait. I wanna before we get into that, should we finish or like just close up that? Was there anything else you wanted to ask me, or should we close up that first story, or anything else on that story? Are we good there? Can we?
Oh,
I
the
don't know how the
first
podcast
story?
works. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know how the podcast
I
works in
thought it
terms of all right,
I
that
thought it
story and
was
question.
closed. She's married to her boyfriend that she had when she went out with you,
Fair,
and that's
fair.
why
Yeah,
she acted weird.
and then the second girl, yeah, okay, I guess we closed out both those stories.
Yeah.
So yeah, no. So to answer, I mean, I think guys would probably appreciate that. I don't know why. If you're on a date and you have one drink and you're having a good time, you wouldn't order another drink unless the guy orders another drink. I think that might be like very much on the side of being like very thoughtful, maybe too much even thoughtful.
I'm also not like the biggest drinker,
Right.
so I'm not like looking to have a bunch of drinks on a Tuesday.
Fair, fair.
So,
No, I think that makes sense. Like in terms of you're matching his vibe, whether or not he wants to stay there or this. But see, but that's also a thing from the. See, I always again, and then taking that vein or running with that, if you will, the concept of like trying to look at the other person's side. I, I in the beginning when I first started dating, I guess didn't appreciate enough the fact that all right, I'm a guy, I have to plan the dates normally, right? That's in my circle, and I'm assuming your circles, and I think it's culturally a lot in a lot of places in the U.S. in a lot of different communities, right? Not just the Jewish Orthodox community. The guy
yeah.
is like expected to make the plan. I think more, and so, but he somewhat sets the tempo of the date in terms of like where you're going, what you're doing, and this. I didn't realize from a girl's perspective that's kind of you're in some sense like relinquishing control, right? You're getting to a car typically with like a stranger who you don't really know that well, and maybe depending on how well you got set up or what it's going on, and then not even that, but then you're going on like to dinner and this and like doing other things, and I think from the girl's perspective, maybe you're not in the mood to do those things and whatnot, and I think not everyone is going to be willing. I've had girls tell me on the first date, like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Let's do something else. Like, and just, and like outright be like, that is not a good plan. I'm not in the mood and just changing it. And some do it more tactfully than others. But I think as I got older, I realized more of like, okay, number one, I talk a lot. Maybe I'll get really excited or like too long. And like, I don't want to be on a date with a girl, especially a first date where maybe she's just being nice and she's not really that interested. Right. And so maybe don't do as long of a first date, or what I think for me goes well is you could break your date into different parts, even if you want to go out on longer dates. And this I think can apply for like life. It kind of works. I found that it works where like I'll say to the other person midway, like maybe I'll go out for okay, let's say we're going out for dinner and we'll go out for dinner, and then after dinner I'll say something like, okay, it's 10 or whatever. I don't know, like do you want to get back? Did you do, did you maybe, did you have work tomorrow? Like, do you need to get back? Or, because I'm thinking we can go for drinks, we can go back. Like, what are you up to? Right. And kind of kick it back to the girl to give her like an option, if she will. Right. I don't think that means that I'm not taking charge because I have a plan. I have this. I think it shows this, but I just think it shows a little bit of respect for her to make that decision whether or not she wants to kind of continue the date and kind of give her an out. And I think then you should, I hope that you're preventing that, that I'm preventing the idea of her then later saying, well, yeah, we were out for so long, but I really wanted to go back and wasn't having a good time.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thoughts?
Usually I'll like ask a guy what we're doing. Like I'll want the plan. I don't get picked up that much. So it's usually I'm meeting him somewhere. So like
Okay.
I'll know, like if we're just going for drinks, I'll know, or if we're going to dinner or whatever. So I kind of have a vibe. So if it's like, oh, he wants to go to dinner on the first date and I really don't want to, I'll be like, oh, could we do like drinks instead?
Okay. But let's
Um,
say can I cut you off for a second? Let's say
yeah.
you say, let's say you're excited. You have a phone call. It went well, whatever. You're super
Mhm.
excited to go on a date and he wants to do dinner and you're like, yeah, I'm down. Right. I mean, and he wants to do something that's gonna be a little bit longer or more intimate or whatever. Right. And you say,
Yeah.
yeah, you get there or he picks you up, whatever. Right. And maybe not even necessarily you, but then turns out he's a total dud or he's socially not what you're looking for or he just
Yeah.
is maybe inappropriate in the sense of like the comments he's making or just something's like not good for you, it's off, and you want to
Yeah.
now get out of the date, but you already like doing right. If you told me, he told you before, he said, oh, we're going to do drinks, we're going to do dinner, and then I want to take you to this cool drink place or whatever, right? And you agreed or whatever, thinking that you like this guy, but now he's being weird or what you call weird. Well, if he doesn't give you an opportunity to get out of the date, it could be hard for
Yeah.
people. You know what I mean? It could be hard. I could see that being
So
annoying for a girl.
I would never agree to like it's just like I think it's okay to add on to a date once you're there, kind of like what you're saying, like giving them an out. I don't think I would ever agree to a two-part date, like to begin with. Like, oh, we're gonna do dinner and then this, or we're gonna do dr- this activity and then drinks. It's for me, it's just more like, okay, why don't we just do the one thing and see how it goes? Or I'll say something like, oh, I'm gonna have to work in the morning, so like, why don't we just do that first thing? It really hasn't happened to me that a guy has like suggested that because I think everyone's a little bit more cautious of their time and energy and money and everything. So I don't know. I guess I really haven't been in that situation. I
Okay. I
have
mean,
been in
I'm
the
also
situation where I've been stuck at a dinner table with somebody that I don't want to be at a dinner table with, which is why I don't like doing dinner on a first date. But
okay. Let's address that. 1 second. Like, can we address that? Can I stop you there
yeah,
and ask? So, and I keep cutting you off. Sorry.
no, it's okay.
Um, the dinner on a first date, you say you don't like it. I've heard like I think I've heard the opposite where I think I've heard people complaining if a guy doesn't take them to dinner, and I've heard both sides of the argument. So it's interesting for me to hear you say like, "Oh, I don't like dinner on a first date." Um, do you not like dinner on a first date if it's going to be like a formal, longer sit down date? What about what about like let's say someone took you to let's say I'm trying to think of a good example like I don't know like let's say no like no I do dairy or whatever, right? So like you
Yeah.
where you can get like a pasta or something. It doesn't have to be like a it's not like going for a 5 course meal if you don't want it to be, or upscale sushi or something like that as a first date as opposed to drinks because some people don't like drinks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, like I have gone to dinner on a first date even after I said I don't like going to dinner on a first date, but it's always a gamble. But, like, even like, I have one specific instance in my mind that happened to me that I've told on the podcast multiple times, but, like, I think we went to Mr. Broadway, and it was this was, like, years and years and years ago, and he was just not socially on my level when I got to the restaurant, and I was just miserable the whole time. I also, like, had an injury and I was in a boot, and I was just, like, dying of discomfort, like, internally and externally the entire date, and the restaurant, even though it wasn't, like, the most upscale, like, millions of
Mm-hmm.
courses, they were just really slow, and like I was stuck there for like more than 2 hours, and I'm like, I
Oh,
don't
wow.
want to be here. So I don't know.
I
But
mean, I think,
then again,
but
there is
yeah.
there is the if you're gonna take me out at 7 o'clock and I'm getting home from work at 6:30, like I don't have time to like do my hair and eat. So
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if you're picking someone up at night, right, and they're working, and they say, let's say you said, right, let's say you're picking them up at 7:30, and they get home, whatever the time is, 7,
yeah,
depending on when they get home, right, in terms of whether they're not, like you might actually, or the other person might be hungry. And again, some people live in New York City, you live in Brooklyn, you live in Manhattan, you live in Long Island, you live in wherever you live in. I think that also could play like a factor in terms of whether you pick up the person or you don't pick up the person you meet. I think the culture in Manhattan I see is typically that people won't pick other people up because they don't have cars. Whereas if you
yeah,
lived in other places, that's like not that. It's much more common in other parts of the country, as opposed to let's say the city, New York City. I think people are more okay to like meet. Um, but I think that's going to dictate a lot about the date also. But here's the thing: if you're and not just going off on a tangent to relate it back to what you're saying, if someone's going to make an effort to pick you up and go on a date, get ready, drive a half hour to pick you up or an hour to pick you up, and then drive to a restaurant a half hour. This for you to go out with them, let's say just have a drink for 10 minutes. That's a little bit like you know what I mean? So if you're agreeing to go on a
yeah,
date, I kind of play that balance where at some point, if you're going to go on a date, I think sometimes you really do have to like commit to if the other person's not doing anything. I think that they're trying and making an effort. I think it's
yeah,
a fine line between quote unquote pretending that you're having a good time and also like and leading them on, but also like not being rude and giving them making them feel like you had a real shot. But if you meet the person for 5 minutes and then and then say I'm sorry I have to leave and then say goodbye, like they're gonna think that it was because you didn't think they were good looking or whatever. And I think you have to be sensitive to the idea of like you don't know what the other person's thinking, and you kind of want to give them a shot also and like make them at least value, feel like you're valuing them as a person and time. It's a sensitive topic. I think there's a
yeah.
lot that goes into it. No, I think there's like a balance there.
No, I agree with you. And I don't know. You mentioned this before. Like I could talk to a wall. So like when a guy does give me anything back, like my dates could be long, whether I'm
Right.
that interested or not, I can talk. So like my dates happen to like go longer. I just don't like the feeling of being trapped.
So that was my point. I don't want to be the trapper in that sense, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't like the feeling of being trapped, but imagine if you're a guy and and you're going on a date and let's say you go on dates, right, and then and come to find out that one of the dates that you thought was going really well, the girl felt like she was trapped and didn't like the date and doesn't want to go out again. Well, you're gonna think to yourself, okay, yeah, I don't want to do that again, right? Like that's not a good
Yeah.
feeling either, right? And you're wasting your time, money, energy, emotions. And so telling the person like, hey, do you think you want to go home now? Sometimes the other person might pick that up as, wait, this person, like maybe the guy is hinting that he wants to go back, and they'll say they want to go home just because they think that that's what you're getting at. So I've had that
Yeah.
too.
I mean, I
Be
think there's a
careful. I
way
think
of
it's just
saying
social.
it.
Yeah,
Like I
I
think it
know it's
could be
hard.
like I'm having a really great time. I'd love to keep hanging out with you, but I recognize that it's getting late.
Right. That's
So,
perfect.
do you
I
want
like
me to
that.
take you home now or would you want to go to a bar?
And I think that's perfect. And I'd like to hope to think that I come off that way when you're saying that. But that takes that. I mean, I don't know that the average person is going to say what you're saying and deliver that well, and the other person's going to
Probably
receive
not.
that well all the time, right? That's like a really like good response. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's I don't know. I'm dating a long time, and I don't know that I'm not saying perfect. I think what you have to realize also though is other person, like if you think about the other person's perspective, you're not necessarily getting all the pieces to the puzzle. That's something that I realize also, right? It's possible that you'll go out with someone and like they could have had a really like terrible day, or they could have something could have happened and you don't know, or maybe you went on 2 dates with someone, you had a great time with them, and then his ex-girlfriend called him up and said like, hey, do you want to get back together? And that happened 10 minutes before your date. and now the person is just like thinking about that, right? And just saying like
Yeah.
that could happen. I'm saying you don't. I guess my point is when you go out with someone, you really never know 100% what's going on in their head, especially like a first or second date like this. You don't know what their backgrounds are. You don't know what's going on in their life. Life's also about timing, I think, and like us humans, I think we're complicated, things. I don't think there's one bespoke, like one unique answer for every situation. And
Yeah.
I think that like what you're, it's so funny to me when the reason I'm also bringing this up is when I hear you say like, oh, I don't like going to dinner on a date. I can like distinctly remember, you know, I can think of like 5 or 6 times in the last 2 or 3 years where I've heard women tell me, hey, you know, your guys are being cheap when they just take you out for X, Y, and Z. How come they're not taking us out for dinner? And I've responded back and told them like, number one, not all girls like that, and number two, like, and then just trying to defend it and give both sides of the argument. And I could hear both sides of the argument, right? I mean, I think it just depends. I think that's just the answer.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, I do prefer when a guy plans a date. Like, the last thing I want to do is plan a date. I actually get really annoyed when a guy asks me, like, because obviously I tell them I want to go out in my area. I'm not trying to travel to go on a date because it's not
Wait,
even
wait, wait.
about
Why?
going.
Why not?
I don't have a car, and I don't want to be trying to, like, make my way back home at night.
Okay, fair. What about if they have a car? Like I guess, or you're not comfortable with them picking. Like let's say it's not even past the first date or second date. Are you fine with meaning? Like
Yeah, I
meaning,
mean, if they're
I don't
gonna
know.
pick me up, fine, but, like, if I'm meeting them somewhere, I would rather them meet me within, like, 10, 15 blocks of my apartment so I know I can get home.
Understood.
Like,
I hear that.
I went on a date this was a while ago by now, this was, like, months ago. I went on a date, and we went out to dinner, and I met him closer to my office because he was coming in on a train, and it was in Midtown, and we met for dinner, and the date, like, was okay. It didn't go anywhere, and, like, we knew at the end of the date it wasn't going anywhere. And then so I was, like, telling my friends, and I was telling my friends, and they were like, "Oh, well, at least you got free dinner out of it." I'm like, "I don't care about the dinner." And also, no, I, like, probably didn't even break even because then I had to pay for my own Uber home because it was, like, 10:30 at night, and I'm like, "I don't wanna get on a subway at 10:30 at night."
Fair, but just for the sake of being argumentative for a second, you did get dinner, right? You got benefited from the Uber home, meaning I understand what you're saying. I'm just joking around when I'm when I'm saying
Meaning,
that,
like,
but I hear what you're saying.
the amount that I
Yeah,
paid for my Uber was equivalent to the amount that he paid for my dinner,
sure, but he didn't get that
I
benefit.
didn't
My
need
point
the
is that
free
you
dinner.
I understand. I know. I'm just joking around, but like, okay, but I just I want to throw this out there for girls also to get the idea of depending on where you're living and whatever it is, and I started off this conversation, I think saying a couple things for like guys to realize that girls, right, are putting in the effort and money and time to effort, time, whatever it is in terms of getting ready. But also keep in mind, like guys are making efforts too, right? The idea that
Yeah,
it's the guy, right? You're not meeting the guy where it's convenient for him. You're doing it where it's convenient for you, and you because and you need to get back okay, and you can't take a subway at night or whatever it is, right? You're going to Uber back, so that's that, and I'm not, and again, I'm not saying that that's wrong. What I'm just suggesting is, but that puts the guy in the position of, well, now he doesn't live in, and again, not maybe he doesn't live in the same city as you or the same area as you, and so now he needs to come into where you are, come into a 15 block radius of where you are. He needs to plan the date. He needs to pay for the date, and then you know get back to wherever he lives. So there is a pressure on the guy, and then that leads me to ask you, and sorry, 2 parts. That leads
okay.
me to ask you, um, okay, so maybe the first date, second date, third date, fourth date, fifth date, whatever he's planning. Is there a point where you're with the idea of the guy saying or expecting, where like maybe at some point you could plan a night too, right? The guy doesn't
Yeah,
have to make all the plans for the whole relationship, like in terms of dates. Like,
yeah,
and I'm not saying you pay for it even. I'm just suggesting that you plan it and he pays. Let's say, are you cool with that?
yeah. Yeah, I
And at
mean,
what point?
I can tell you from my own personal relationship experience, I
Yeah.
have gotten to a point in a relationship where it's like, okay, I'll plan this one, I'll pick this one up, I'll do this. I think my relationship history is a little bit different. Like each of my relationships were a little bit different in terms of like different variables that went into that, but it was like one time I really wanted to do something and I was like, okay, it would be nice if I asked the guy who I was dating if he would want to come with me and make like a date out of it. So I did. And I'm like, okay, I'm planning this one. I paid for it. I planned. I did all of that. But I don't want to be doing that unless we're like dating.
And
Like
what
going
does
on
it
a,
mean that you're dating?
like going on a couple dates is like okay, that's one thing. But like at this point, I think had already like kind of defined that we were in a relationship. Like once you're past the point of like, okay, he's asking you out for the next date. It's like
So,
we know we're
okay,
seeing each other.
okay. My question, this leads me to my question now. So my question is, this is what I wanted to ask you. This is something that came up more recently for me.
Okay.
When do you consider yourself dating, or what does it mean to be dating? Does that mean you're dating? Well, I don't want to give you a hint of what as to what I'm thinking. But what does the term dating mean?
Um, I think there has to be some discussion involved with it.
Does
Like,
dating mean exclusive dating? That's, I guess, what I'm asking you.
yeah, I think so.
Okay, so if you go on a date with someone, then you go on 2 dates, you go on 3 dates, you go on 5 dates with them, and you reach the point where you're seeing each other, you're texting each other basically every day, you're going out for weekends, and you're going all the time. You're at that point you're not dating because they could theoretically be dating other people.
Um, I mean, from my own personal experience, we've had conversations about it.
Okay, you have a conversation, and now you guys are exclusive. You're not dating anyone else.
We're not dating anyone else. We're exclusively seeing each other. And like it's a relationship. It doesn't have to be like, "Oh, you're my boyfriend," but it's like
Correct.
it
Yeah,
is a
I hear you.
relationship.
I didn't mean correct. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. I
Sorry.
mean, different people have different terminology and different
Yeah, yeah,
ideas and different views about this, but like that's what I think at least.
yeah.
When it's
That's
no
why I didn't mean to
longer
say correct. I meant to say I
No, no,
agree.
no,
It
it's
was
fine.
that's patronizing.
Like
Sorry.
when it's no longer I'm waiting for him to ask me on the next date. It's just like we're seeing each other, we're making a plan together. It's like, "Oh, what day works for you this week?" Like I don't know. It might not necessarily totally be all formal dates. It might be like we'll go out or like we can hang out in someone's apartment.
If you're seeing
Like
each other every day, essentially, and it's
not
just it's
every day.
assumed that you're going to go out on weekends. You're seeing each other almost every day, right? Like basically every day, and you're assuming that you're going to when you don't have to make when you're assuming that you're going to have plans unless you're busy with friends or doing something else, but like that the other person's
Yeah,
not dating other people. Would you consider that
yeah.
dating? If you, I don't know your religious level, but let's say for people who are okay, again, I
Like
don't
I'm
know, keep this
modern.
okay, so let's just say if you're being intimate, whatever that means with the other person, and whatever level that is, past a
Yeah,
certain point, and you're saying you're exclusive, like at some point you're dating, and even, that might not
yeah,
be your their girlfriend, but like maybe you'll have that other conversation. But okay,
yeah. But you are exclusively seeing each other. Things have gone to the next level.
okay, and then let me ask you this: uh, from your perspective, and this is just your own personal perspective, and it's not
Yeah,
too personal to share, but what do you think? I guess let me think how I want to ask this. When you're dating someone, like the idea of asking when, like, okay, you're gonna have to have that conversation as to, oh, wait, that could be exclusive and whatnot, right?
hmm
When do you when before you have that conversation, regardless of that conversation, do you think it's normal to be dating multiple people? I guess is what I'm trying to ask. Like, at what point do you think it's not normal for your own self or for someone else
yeah,
or the guy that you're dating? Let's say in your and I'm sure this is a very personal, question for every person, and then there's no right or wrong
yeah,
answer. It's just whatever you think is normal. But you know, I would imagine that if I said to you, you're dating a guy for 6 months and you're going out all the time, and you're, not you, but let's say two people are
yeah,
sleeping together and you're dating for months, at some point, it's a little bit ridiculous if you find out, I think this is me. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm also dating another person. Like at some point that would be super weird,
Yeah.
right? Like we have 3 kids together, we'll have another girlfriend. Like at some point, right, we're married, but I'm dating other people. It's not exclusive. Like
Yeah.
when do you think that line comes up? Or you think you have to have the conversation? What
I
what do you think?
mean, so for me personally, honestly, I don't have that much time or energy or brain power. So, like, if I'm dating someone, if I'm going on like more than 1 or 2 dates with someone, I'm probably not seeing or talking to anyone else. But that's just me, and that's not like my expectation on him. I wouldn't feel right going on more than 3 dates while still seeing other people. But I think it's like you have to have a conversation because I think with a lot of dating things, it comes down to communication. Like just because I don't have the time or energy to be dating other people doesn't mean he doesn't. And like, I don't know, like I can tell you from my own personal relationships, I really only had two that were exclusive relationships. Like we were defined relationships. One of them, I just basically told him we were exclusive at some point. I don't think he was dating anyone else. He like barely had time to date me, and I wasn't dating anyone else. And then the other one, we kind of like talked about it early on that we don't really like dating a bunch of people at the same time, like more than one person at the same time. Like it's just like I want to dedicate my energy to one person. But this is also like we're adults with busy schedules and I don't know, I have limited energy and brain capacity, but I don't know. I think it's like whenever it feels right to have that conversation. But I'm always fine having that conversation.
I
And
mean,
like I'll say it like I don't feel comfortable doing XYZ if like you're seeing other people.
look, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I hear you. My personal perspective on this is if I meet someone and they're not talking to anyone else, which is probably rare, right? Like, I assume everyone, and I'm trying to think about it from the other person's perspective. Like once we start dating for a while, I wouldn't be when I say dating, like if we go on 3, 4, 5 dates, 6 dates, right, and we're, you know, let's just say we're holding hands and kissing and stuff. Let's say, okay, keep this super PG. Let's say we're just holding hands. I'm not don't want to throw out too much. We're holding hands, okay. Shocker. I'm not showing any. I don't know if I can say that. Yeah, I don't know if your listeners all know what that means, but shomer negia is like watching of the touch. So in Orthodox, like modern, in in certain Orthodox, like, or I guess all Orthodox, really, you're not really supposed to be like touching the opposite sex, unless you're married to them and whatever. But anyway, like even holding hands when I say touching. So once you get past a certain point, and I think that point for me is much earlier on, and I think it depends on, there's not a defined, date number per se, but like, yeah,
Mhm.
rule of thumb, I guess maybe 3, whatever it is. But like certainly once I get past a certain point, for what I feel for myself, like once we're, 3, 4, 5 dates, 6 dates, whatever it is, if I found out then that other person was going on other quote unquote first dates with other people, I would just think to myself, like, yeah, no, like, I'm not going to be okay with me, like, what we're going on, which our 15th date or whatever, and you're going on first dates with other people. I get it if people are not quote unquote ready to get, and for myself also, right? I'd be dating someone I don't know that I want to necessarily marry them or whatever it is, but that's why you're dating, right? You're seeing if it works. This, I don't know that you're even giving that other person a chance if you're if you're actively going on other dates. I mean, maybe mentally you're thinking, maybe there's someone better out there, but if you're actively going on other dates, yeah, I don't know. To me,
Yeah.
that doesn't seem right. Now, I hear the idea of like if someone's talking to someone else from beforehand, or like they kind of have this like long term, maybe someone who doesn't, long distance type of thing, and they know someone for a while, and they kind of, but at some point, like, yeah, you should be cutting that stuff off, and I think that
Mhm.
stuff might be harder or different, but I don't understand that. And if I'm dating someone and they told me they need more time or whatever, that I would understand. But I almost think I don't want to say disrespectful because I don't know, but I would feel disrespected and I wouldn't feel like I respected myself if I was dating someone for a significant amount of time and being intimate with them, and then I found out, or they no, or rather they told me like, hey, you know, I like you, I want to keep dating you, but I also want to go date other people. like while I'm
Yeah.
dating you. I just, I mean, does that sound normal to you?
I mean, I think it's more of the secular culture, especially these days where hookup culture is the big thing. People don't want to commit. People date for a long, long time. I don't think that aligns personally with what I'm looking for. Like, I'm trying to date and be marriage minded. So like you're talking about like seeing someone for 6 months. Like if I'm seeing someone for 6 months, we're talking about getting engaged.
Right. Yeah, no, I
Like
hear you.
it's not like, oh, I'm seeing them for 6 months and they're also seeing other people and we're just being
Right.
super casual. Like, no, casual has its limits. And I'm not really looking for anything casual. So for me, like seeing other
100%.
people is a casual thing. And like I'm not
I
looking for
I
casual.
I 100% agree with you, and I actually made this statement to myself, and I, regardless of whether it's true, I hope to get to this point, or I want this to be true for myself. Like, I want to date someone, and I think logically, I think this is accurate, maybe, but maybe emotionally, or like in my heart, or I guess like, or in my desires, maybe I can't. It's harder for me to actually stick by this, but I wouldn't want to date if someone told me like, hey, there's this great girl, you're not going to marry her though. She's a great girl. She's funny. She's smart. She's pretty. She's nice. A lot of fun. Everything's great. But I'm telling you right now, you're not going to marry her. She's not going to marry you. You're right.
Hmm.
Well, hey, like I don't know. At this point in my life, and this is because of my age, I would say like, yeah, I'm not. I mean, I want to get married. I want to have kids. Like, I'm not interested in like what it's almost it's a super negative. And if I was being smart, I'd be like, yeah, no, no, thank you. So as soon as someone tells me, yeah, hey, I want to date other people too, I think what they're really telling you is like, yeah, I don't like you that much. And so
Yeah.
thank you next. Like that's great. I'm saying thank you for telling me that. Not in a mean way. It's just, that's yeah, no thanks. Like I mean, thank you, but no thank you. And I think that that's what you have to. I think what you tell the person is like, okay, like you're sure in the sense of like, meaning you can keep dating for a while. I'm not asking you to marry me, but if you know that you want to date other people and you don't want to quote unquote, maybe they're worried for the time. If I'm not valuable, and I take that if someone said that to me as you're not valuable, like maybe they're saying like I have a limited amount of time. I need to date multiple people because I don't want to be wasting my time with you. You're not valuable enough that you're too valuable for me to let you go. And I'm enjoying this, or I'm liking certain aspects of this, or you treat me well, but I don't like you enough where I don't want to keep dating, where I need to maybe keep dating other people. If that's where they're at, I think that, I mean, I don't know. To me, I think that I don't know. Someone maybe could explain to me the other side of that argument, but I just don't see it. I don't understand how one could live that way.
No. And again, I think that point of view comes from the more secular world
Right.
where there's more of a sense of hookup culture and more of a sense of like, oh, I'm going to date someone for years and years and years before I even think about marrying them. Whereas like in the Orthodox world, modern Orthodox and even like more religious and even like in the more modern circles, like my friends and I who like want to get married, we're not looking to like mess around like that.
Okay, I should have put a disclaimer on that, or I should have emphasized the point that I'm saying I don't know how anyone could live like that if they're in the orthodox
Yeah.
mindset, or more so of the mindset of, hey, I want to get married. So not even orthodox. If you're in the hey, I'm looking to get married and not just play around, and like I want to get married in the next short amount of time. In the sense of when I
Yeah.
say short, I mean I want to be dating. I'm not looking to date for more than a year or 18 months or whatever it is. But I'm not looking to date for 5, 10 years. I'm looking to date for a shorter amount of time and then date for 9, 10 months. But throughout that time, you're talking about the idea of getting engaged and then to be married, right? Like,
Yeah.
I
I
just
don't
don't see how one could do that and
yeah,
date other
and I
people. I mean, I
don't
just don't even know what that means.
I don't think people do. I mean, I could be naive
Yeah,
or just uneducated about it. Like in my own personal experiences, like that's not what
got it.
like we that's I haven't heard of that. Even
Fair,
with my
fair,
friends who like are not religious or not Jewish, if they're dating someone and they're serious about dating them, like they're just dating them.
fair, 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 fair.
I think this would be a good time to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. So we will be right back. Sticky Situations is sponsored by Corona Crush. Are you tired of swiping on dating apps? Tired of guessing whether the cute guy or girl you keep seeing around is Jewish and or single? Then you need to run, not walk, to join Corona Crush. Corona Crush is a Jewish organization working to create Jewish couples always. Corona Crush has over 30 confirmed engagements, over 22,000 members from all over the world, and has set up over 50,000 speed dates. Join the Corona Crush Facebook group and post yourself or have a friend post you and see who reaches out. Fill out the survey to sign up for virtual speed dating events happening every other week. Corona Crush is 100% free and 100% Jewish. Worst case, you end up with some stories of your own. Best case, you find the love of your life. Try it out today. Here on Sticky Situations, we tend to focus on bad dating stories, but sometimes dates do go well and lead to proposals and weddings. Who would have thought? And what do all of those require, you might be asking? Well, the answer is flowers. Who doesn't want flowers from someone they've been seeing? Don't forget, flower petals and bouquets needed for proposals. And that's even before all the flowers that go into weddings. Sticky Situations is sponsored by Primrose Flower Shop. In my opinion, Primrose is the coolest flower shop around and has the best customer service to fulfill all of your floral needs. Primrose offers a range of services from your basic bouquets to subscription services where you can get flowers delivered once a week. They deliver all over the tri state area, including Manhattan. Primrose does weddings, bar and bat mitzvahs, and other simchas. I've personally been to a wedding where Primrose did the flowers, and the work they did was beyond gorgeous. Primrose additionally offers in store proposals, including a romantic setup with candles and music. Primrose is located at 2922 Avenue M in Brooklyn, and the phone number is 929 376 9815. You can also follow Primrose on Instagram at PrimroseNY. So, if you can't get someone out of your head, buy them some flowers from Primrose. They'll either love it or they'll find you really creepy. But regardless, the flowers will be out of this world. Okay, we're back, everybody. So, we were talking about a little bit before the break about how, depending on your background, is your perspective on a lot of these topics. And we just thought it was an interesting topic of conversation came up at a Shabbat meal that Robert and I were both at. And we thought it would be like an interesting topic to discuss, especially because I hopefully it's not still super relevant while you guys are listening to this episode, but while we're recording it, there's a lot going on in the Orthodox community right now that's focused on the agunah crisis and halachic prenups and everything that goes into the agunah crisis. So I'm just going to briefly explain what an agunah is for the people who don't know, and then Robert has some interesting perspectives on prenups and things like that. So basically, an agunah. So in Jewish law, a couple gets married, like a halachic Jewish marriage, and in order to end a Jewish marriage, the man has to give a woman a halachic divorce. So a Jewish divorce, which is called a get. So a woman cannot be considered halachically divorced. So she's not divorced in Jewish law unless she has a get from her husband. And this causes a problem because a lot of men, not a lot, thankfully, especially in the modern Orthodox world, we have precautions in place to prevent it. But sometimes a man will not give a woman a get. So, and he could have various reasons for it. A lot of times he's just a little bit messed up in the head, or he's trying to use it to leverage various things of her. It's actually considered a form of abuse to withhold a get. But unfortunately, there are women in the Orthodox world, many more than there should be, which there should be zero. But there are unfortunately many women who are basically held prisoner in a marriage that is no longer for years, years. And this has become super, it's always been a relevant issue in the Jewish community, but there is now an Instagram influencer who is also an agunah activist, and I might not be describing her fully correctly. Someone just drew my attention to it because I tend to have a lot of opinions about things, and so they asked me my opinion about it. So then I did a little bit of research. I looked into her posts and everything, and basically this activist slash influencer is trying to institute a mikvah strike, which is basically women shouldn't go to the mikvah, so they shouldn't be intimate with their husbands in order to get the men to actually care about this agunah crisis. And she's doing it to raise awareness for one specific agunah. I personally think she's brilliant, and I'm not married, so I can't really participate in the mikvah strike, but I like to tell everyone that I'm participating. But I know it's caused a lot of controversy in the Orthodox community. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on it. It's actually really scary seeing a lot of these opinions on it, especially coming from men and being a single woman who is dating guys like this. And it just like, unfortunately, true colors really come out in these ugly times. But whether you agree with her or not, this woman is a genius because everyone in the Orthodox community is talking about this and about her and about this specific aguna. Like, nobody, I would never have known about this specific aguna or the extent of a lot of this if I didn't hear about the mikvah strike. So she's a genius in her PR and her marketing. Like, at the end of the day, you could agree with her or disagree with her, but you have to admit she's brilliant for doing all of this. But anyway, in order to help prevent having an aguna situation, in the modern Orthodox community, a lot of rabbis, I actually think no rabbi who's a member of the RCA will marry a couple without a halachic prenup. So a halachic prenup was instituted. I don't know the full legal details of the halachic prenup, so maybe Robert, this is where you can help fill in what exactly a halachic prenup is and how it helps against the becoming an aguna. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so just a little disclaimer first. So I guess I will say I am an attorney, but I'm not representing myself on this call as as an
Yeah,
attorney.
he's not
I'm
giving
certain,
anyone legal advice.
right. I'm not giving anyone legal advice, and I do not practice, and I've never practiced in really like family law. It's not my area of expertise. So I'm not like not giving anyone legal advice, but I mean, it's just look as a human being, and as you know, I grew up going to yeshiva and stuff, and so I'm familiar with the concept of what a get is. I never got married, but I have friends who have, and I know people who didn't give a get, and I know girls who didn't get a get right away, and I guess I'll throw out a couple different things like for and again, not I'm not even, and I'm not holding myself out as a Torah scholar, right, or someone that knows. I'm not saying that I am a beacon for Orthodox Judaism, and I'm saying what's right or wrong or this. But I mean, I am who I am, and I know certain things. I will say that I prefer probably to focus the conversation more on like on the idea of a prenup, halachic prenup. We can talk about agunas and stuff. I mean, again, I don't want to mention any specific like people or anything like that, and I think we're going to keep it like super general, or like the point that you were saying before about the influencer and the mikvah strike, and and I don't know for the well, I guess for the sake we have to focus on certain things. I will say that yes, I do think that the marketing perspective, like a lot of people are talking about it, so good for her on that. And the idea of like withholding sex for the whole community to try to do that. And this, I'm not commenting on it. I will comment on this idea that I myself, and I'm not saying this is halakhically correct or not. And I think there's a big difference about some. You could not everything that I maybe think is like what a halakha would be, but I personally will say my views. Like I personally, and I don't always maybe love putting my views out there on social media, but certain things I think you sometimes do have to stand up for certain things. Like, yeah, I think it's terrible. And again, I've never been married, and I like to say, try to think of people and their perspectives and think about the other side. And this is a very long way of saying it, and I'll try to cut to the chase. But like, yeah, like I don't think, and I think I could say this outright, pending, force majeure, I think that it's basically never acceptable for a guy to withhold giving a get. And I say basically, the only maybe time I could think about it would be like if the woman is maybe molesting her own children, and the guy knows for a fact that the mother's molesting them, and this is the only thing that he could do. I don't know. It would have to be a really weird case, like something.
Hmm.
And I'm not just talking about like, oh, and I'm not saying where the guy says, "Oh, I'm not going to get a visitation." That is not where I'm saying. I think you have to give a get right away, except for like certain cases. I've been told by the like certain people in the Orthodox community that the rabbis don't really think that in terms of, and again, I'm not speaking for the whole rabbis. This is opening up a whole can for me, and I didn't
Yeah,
want to get into it. I'm talking too
it's
fast.
okay. We could just touch on it because if you
Yeah,
get me into it, I have a lot to say on it too,
I
and
just,
I don't necessarily want to get into it on the podcast.
I mean, I look, the idea of like maybe you don't give it until your Jewish divorce is separate. I didn't know that that was that some people were telling me that. For me, let's speak in broad terms. I think you know, pending basically in all cases, like yeah, you should give a get. You shouldn't use it as a bargaining chip. I kind of, and again, this is probably against halacha, but like I do think of the concept so pretty chauvinistic. Sorry to
Yeah,
say that, I don't know, and I grew up
I
Orthodox, but
agree.
it is right. Like the guys have a lot more power in this, and it just whatever it is. That being said, like learn in law school at least is from what I understand, like in New York, like men and women have the same rights in court in terms of custody. So fight it out in court. I know that sucks, but that's just life. And I just, to use a get as leverage, it really bothered me. And I'll just tell you one thing and then we can jump into it. I got involved in two get situations and where I helped the girl get a get. One of them, one of them was, and I'm not going to give any details that I think you could try to figure out who these people are, but basically, I knew this girl. I did not like the guy actually. I knew the guy from way back before she married him. I thought he was a low life, to just throw that out there. She married the guy anyway. They were married for a couple months, and then he said to her like, "Look, I'm not giving you a get. You got to pay me back for the wedding, and you have to sign a piece of paper that says that you're crazy, and so that I can tell other people that you're crazy and show them so that I can date and remarry to other people." And he wanted to get, and she didn't have the money. She was going to borrow it from her parents, and I told her like, absolutely not, and basically gave her some advice where she went to a lawyer actually who gave her terrible advice that was incorrect. She had never gotten legally married, according to her. She only did a Jewish marriage. And so she didn't think she could get divorced. And it turned out, I spoke to a lawyer, found some information. She could file for divorce and yada, yada, whatever. She got her debt. The guy went traveling and he was abroad doing who knows what. And she ended up calling him and got her debt in 2 weeks. And so I told over
Wow.
that story at a Shabbos table, and someone said that her friend was having an issue. Could she call me? And I said sure. And then that person called me. Turns out I knew who the guy was. Also, maybe I had bad friends. I don't know. And this case was more of a sticky situation, but it was sticky in the sense that this case involved they had no kids, and I said to them, the first couple, I said, like, look, this is, you have no kids, just you walk away, he walks away, you guys dated for a couple months, they may dated for longer, but I'm saying you were married for a couple months, just why can't you guys just walk away from each other, no harm no foul, like you don't get anything, he doesn't get anything, and just leave each other alone, like just move on with your lives. And that's what they ultimately did. This case they had a child, and he told me like, look, I'm not giving her a get because I'm not, she's not going to let me see the kid. And I said to him, so just to be clear, you're extorting her, and you're basically, like, I don't want to say blackmail, extortion, but let's say extortion. You're basically not gonna give her a get until she agrees to give you what you want, right? So that's extortion, right? I mean, how is it not extortion? And he fought me on it, and then he eventually said, like, yeah, I'm extorting her because I don't think that she. And there was like a lot of backstory here where he was probably actually right in the sense of if she went to court because of certain things that he did. And by the way, a lot of guys, my understanding, and again, not giving legal advice, if you go to court, and I'm gonna stop this in 1 minute because I realize I've been rambling. But if you go to court and you're a guy and you have a normal and you have a job and you're a normal guy and you're not a drug addict and you're not doing whatever it is, you're going to get visitation right for your children. My understanding, right? Even people who are criminals and do other things and convicted criminals in this, they still get to see their children, from what I understand. My understanding is it has to be like really really bad for you to get no visitation, right? For whatever that is, the courts are very. My understanding is that they're not looking to do that, right? They think it's generally what's in the best interest of the child is to have both parents in their life somewhat. Maybe it's supervised, maybe it's this or that. In this case, the guy actually was on drugs, and I said to him, like, look, if you're going to force her to sign whatever it is, don't you realize though that she can go to court later? It doesn't matter what she signs, and later say like, look, you're on drugs. He denied it, but I said to him, you know the answer. So if you're really on drugs, you're gonna fight with her. She's not gonna like you. Let's say she gives into whatever you want, and eventually you're gonna give the get, right? Because you're not that type of guy to not give the get, right? He said, yeah. And I said, okay, so you're gonna give her the get. What's gonna stop her then? Because you made her wait for a year, 2 years, whatever it would be, and then she's gonna hate you, right? and then she's gonna take away your children from you, even if maybe because let's say legally she could because you're a drug addict, you're not going to be able. Maybe she should anyway. You're a drug addict, like anyway. And we had this conversation, and it basically went through the steps. He hung up the phone on me. The end of the story is though, 2 weeks later, he called me back, apologized, and he ended up giving a get. I mean, they had to work out certain things, and in that case, they told me like, look, we have to work out our civil divorce first, and then we'll do the get. And I don't know, and I would love for people, maybe your next guest, to find out if that's actually true in Orthodox, but whatever. Anyway, sorry,
I
I
haven't
digressed
heard
too
that.
far.
From what I've heard, and again, I'm not an
Yeah,
expert either, just from what I've heard from other people's scenarios or from the norm, that you're supposed to give a get right away and you fight out the civil divorce in court. Civil divorces can take up to a
yeah,
year,
yeah,
multiple
yeah.
years. You give a get right away.
So again, I sorry for getting a little emotional on that. I am not. I
No, no,
mean,
no,
I
it's
think
fine.
based on hearing, you can see what side of the topic I
Yeah.
personally feel on. And again, I'm not even talking about halacha. I'm just talking about my own personal feelings. But let's get into like if we have still time.
Yeah.
I don't know, but let's get into the halachic prenup and a regular prenup because I think most people. I find it funny that not funny, but I think it's actually a shame. I think that people don't even really know. When I talk to people, they don't really know what a halachic prenup is, and I think people don't even know what a prenup is. And again, not to patronize people, but I just think that people don't really have a sense of what it is. And so, whether or not you can want these things, shouldn't you at least get informed on what they are?
Mhm. Can you just quickly explain what a halachic prenup is to everyone? Because I think even I don't really know the full extent.
Sure.
One of my friends got married recently and we were talking about it, and she was like kind of explaining it. Like, I do know what it is conceptually, but I don't think I know all the actual legal details of it.
Okay. And again, not giving legal advice. This is my understanding. I could be wrong. And so, go, but guys, girls, go Google it, look it up, talk to lawyers, whatever. But I think we should open up the conversation. So maybe just start off with the idea of what the concept of a like prenup is, and get into like what a halachic prenup is or prenup in
Sure.
general. So a prenup, the concept of prenup is prenuptial agreement. You're making an agreement before you take your nuptials, right? Before you're going to get married, is my understanding. And you're saying, hey, listen, we're going to get married, but before we get married, let's agree on what happens if it doesn't work out and we get divorced, right? And so in New York, you're if you get married and you don't do that, well, you kind of have quote unquote a prenup, and there's actually a postnup also, right? People don't know that maybe, but there's also you can agree after you get married too. But the idea is that if you don't do a prenup, then the courts will provide you with a quote unquote prenup anyway, because meaning they're gonna tell you what happens when you get divorced, but you're just gonna be bound by New York law or by whatever the judge tells you. So the idea is instead of leaving it up to the courts, two people can come together and say, hey, contractually as two adults who are going to get married now, given our unique situation, because we're two people, we know our situations, and for whatever reason, one party or the other both party wants something, and they'll contractually beforehand as to what will happen when we get divorced. And my understanding is that it makes the process, if it makes the process in certain ways easier because you're not like necessarily fighting over what should happen. You're kind of having that, and also, I mean, not that it makes it easier. You're basically even if it doesn't make it easier, you are also changing what would happen, right? So even regardless of whether it was left ambiguous, there's going to be something that would happen, and now you're changing that in theory, right? So for argument's sake, let's say the idea is, you're going to split things 50-50. Well, you could split it and not say 50-50. People, I think, have a misconception of they think that if you get married, and let's say the woman has $5 million in cash, and the guy has $1 million in cash, and they get married, and then they get divorced. People think, okay, take that. 5 plus 1 is 6, and they divide it 3-3. So the woman in that case would lose $2 million. That's not what actually happens. Again, not my area of expertise. And different states have different laws, whether it's common law, or I think what do they call it? Like marital property, separate property, common law marriage. I forget I'm mixing up the terminology. I forget what it is. But in certain states, they have different rules in terms of how it works, like how you separate property and how I know the rules more for New York. Big shocker, like I looked it up, but a little bit. But in New York, I'm forgetting the name. The concept essentially is that when two people got married, there is an agreement that New York will provide you with when you get divorced. And now let me answer your question, then we can delve more into it. You asked about halachic prenup. So
Yeah.
halachic prenup, same concept, right? Two people are getting married. Before you get married, you're going to say like, hey, if we get divorced, here's what's going to happen. And it's the concept of why we're saying halachic prenup is really what it's really supposed to get at. My understanding would be that it would really get at the portion of the get. I will say that I've read some prenups, and they also don't talk about the get. They do other things. My understanding was halachic prenup would specifically be, they're saying halachic prenup, maybe it could be encompassing more. For me personally, my interpretation and also what it should be, or what I would maybe want more, would be, yeah, I'll sign a document that says that I have to give the woman a get, or that a man has to give the woman a get. But what it isn't, people think it's a magic thing where in concept in law, there's a concept that you sign a divorce, you sign a document, and you hold it in escrow, right? And so what people think, they think that a halachic prenup is like that. An escrow meaning that, let's say two people make an agreement, and let's say you're signing over a house to another third party. Well, you sign over a document, a deed, you give it to me, I'm the lawyer, I hold it in escrow, and based on an agreement, an escrow agreement, I would now do whatever that, meaning if you do X, Y, and Z, then I'll deliver this deed. You would now tell me the other person, let's say, is going to get the house from you after they do X, Y, and Z. They show me proof that they did X, Y, and Z, and as the lawyer, I say, okay, here you go, here's the document out of escrow. Until I release it out of escrow, they don't have that document. So, in essence, you could take a get, put it in escrow, and then have one of these agreements where, okay, halachic prenup, then if they agree, then Bezdin will release the get. That's not what halachic prenup is. Let me just be clear. You can't do what I just described according to what I understand. You can't give the get before you get married to the woman, according to halachic Orthodox Judaism, is my understanding. So what they did was they made this concept of a prenup, which is like, listen, stick if you don't give the get. So it's two people saying, okay, hey, no problem, getting married. If you don't give the get, you're going to get fined a certain amount of money every single day. That's what I understand it to be, where it's like, hey, I'm going to give a get, and you need to give a get. If you don't give a get, you owe. And I don't know why it's written this way, but my understanding is it's like $130 a day. It's like 50, 60 grand a year, something like that, which, and I don't know how, I haven't looked into whether it really gets enforced. I think it does, but I don't know whether it really does get enforced and what the track record or the history is of in these prenups, halachic prenups, whether they actually do get enforced. You know, the one thing I will tell you is that in those agreements, they sometimes, you can opt in. There's more things you can write in a halachic prenup, and not just that part. You can also talk about finances. You can say that you agree to go to court to talk about your finances, which, me being an attorney, I don't know that I'd be comfortable going to a bezdin and having to do that. I don't know. I'm more comfortable going to regular court. Not saying that that's appropriate in like world that you should do that as an Orthodox Jew. I don't know, but I'm just saying, meaning the halachic, they ask for more things. Children, it's very hard to like. You can write certain things in a prenup, in halachic prenup, in any kind of prenup, I guess, about the concept of what would happen with children who get custody and things. But it's not really necessarily enforceable, because later the courts will always say, I think, like, oh, what's in the best interest of the child, and they'll be willing to do that. My understanding is that a regular prenup can hold up in court. And so let's get in, and I don't want to talk too much, but let's maybe get into the concept of what an actual prenup is. And so I'm going to turn the table over to you for a second and give you the mic. What do you think happens when two people get married? I'm putting you on the spot. When they get married, what do you think happens? So we can make up a fake example, but what do you think happens to the assets that the person has before they get married in New York specifically?
Well, I also have the advantage of having been at the same Shabbat meal as you the other night when we were
Okay.
talking about this.
See if you were listening.
Um, yeah, I was listening. I was taking notes, figurative notes. I think that each person, like when you get married, everyone still has their own assets, but then there are combined assets that you buy together if you join bank accounts. But from my understanding is you can still have separate assets.
Right. So I think your description, in my opinion, is right in the sense of like you have, okay, so you have marital property and you have separate property. And now I think I'm getting the names right. And I was wrong about some of those other names. Don't hold me to it in terms of like the different states,
Fine.
what the laws are. But
Don't take this as like legal. And if
yeah,
anybody is like a family lawyer or an expert on this,
yeah,
feel free to
yeah.
DM me or email me and I can issue a correction.
and I want to know, yeah, and I want to know if I'm wrong or right. But my understanding, and not giving legal advice, is that so like if you were married and before you got married, you had assets, you had capital, and you kept that separate, and you come into the marriage, that's your assets, it's your property, and that's separate property. So if you had 10 million people think, oh well, the person had a lot of money, so want to like get a prenup. That's what they tell you about movies, and if you get married without that, she's going to leave you with half. Like from the songs, that's what they say.
Yeah.
That's not 100% necessarily true, in the sense that, like, no, you wouldn't necessarily do that. You could take steps to protect yourself, but once you start commingling the assets, right, combining them, and then and then spending out of that money, it becomes more difficult for the court to determine what is separate property and what's marital property. Also, if you have some money, you have some capital, and you use that money to make more money, well, what happens to the fruits of that money, right? Well, that if you're married and that was your job, then the other side would be entitled. They can say, listen, that's marital property, and now we're gonna now have to talk about separating that. And the idea being that you're going to separate it, let's say 50-50. And so that could be a lot of money. And then also there's the concept of how long does like the woman have to support the guy after they get divorced, or the guy support the gal after they get divorced, right? Either or. So, and how does it work? I think it's like an equation even, or I think it has to work like, my understanding is that if you're married for 3 years, you have to support the other person for a year. If you're married for, it's a third, I think. So if you're married for 3 years, you support for 1 year, and there's alimony and there's maintenance, and did the other person give up a career to help take care of the kids and help take care of you and other things? And it's a complicated thing, and in terms of how you figure that out, which is why some people will say like, hey, and this is, I don't know how I feel about this also. I mean, I think it's a very personal thing, but some people, I could see somebody saying to the other person, hey, listen, I've been working for X amount of years. I make this amount of money a year. Maybe I went to be a doctor and I have, this thing. I spent 15 years becoming a neurosurgeon, and now I'm starting to make money and I just paid off my loans. And so if we get married and we're married for 2 years, and whatever, like I don't really want to give you that, or half of that necessarily if we're only married for a certain time or whatever it is. And I could see someone saying to the other person, okay, look, married for like 6 months, or less than a year or whatever, and yeah, you're not working, I'm working. Okay, I'm going to give you 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, $350,000. We're agreeing to it now. No lawyers. I don't want to have to, because in theory, the more moneyed spouse. So if the woman's making more money than the husband, or has more money, I don't know how that works exactly. But in theory, from what I remember from school, or from taking the bar, I think they technically have to pay for the other side's lawyer. Like if the other person's not making any
Well,
money, or I think has
yeah,
more
I
money, they
mean,
have to pay
that
for the other
sounds
side.
right from my limited knowledge and the TV shows that I watch. I watch a
If you
lot
have
of
no
Real
money,
Housewives,
if you're
and
a
there's
housewife,
divorces.
if you're a house husband and you don't make any money and your wife makes all the money and you're getting divorced, I think that the housewife would have to pay for the house. Sorry, the working woman would have to pay for the house husband's attorney fees, and so she would essentially have to pay for her attorneys and his attorneys to fight each other, which could drive a person crazy. So
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the concept of saying like, look, I will give you $50,000, $500,000, we're married for a year. And if you're married from 1 to 5 years, you get $2 million for this, whatever. And that portion is like this. And then the only thing, if you don't have children, then you don't have to, argue over it. You know what I mean? Like I'll give you $100,000, or you earned, it's not even giving, like you as right. Like we're agreeing now that you're going to get $150,000 a year, or, $10,000 a month for the next 4 years, so that, yeah, you could get back on your feet, do other things, but and then maybe you get some lump sum or whatever, figure out whatever is reasonable, whatever you guys wanted to figure out. Why not come up with that term before? It's kind of hard to say, and I go back and forth on it, and I'm curious to hear what other people's perspective is. And this is like what you said before. I think it matters how you grew up. I could also see somebody say like, look, no, you want to build a life with this person? Screw that. Like they're your partner, and I'm not going to have a prenup because I want to have like an equal partner, and I don't want to have any parachute and get out some easier way to get divorced. I don't know. What's your take on it?
So I should preface this by saying that I watch a lot of Real Housewives,
Okay.
and which might sound ridiculous, but one of the lessons that I've learned from the Real Housewives, all of them, so a lot of them, when the show starts, they're nobodies. These shows started years ago, before reality TV was a big thing, before Bravo was a big thing. And a lot of them started out as actual real housewives, and their husbands were wealthy or worked or whatever. Most of them have subsequently gotten divorced. And then a bunch of them have made their own money. They're on the show for 10 years. They have side hustles, they have all of this stuff where they have a lot of their own money. And then they get married again and they don't get a prenup and then they get screwed over. So I've just seen on the show a lot of times where these women get screwed over. And I personally, and like, this isn't to say that I have so many assets or whatever, but I think when the time comes, I would like to sit down with my future husband and a lawyer and draft something up. Maybe not everything has to be decided, but I have a career, I have savings. I hope to have assets one day. Like I hope to have a house, I hope to have things, and I just want to build in some sort of protection for myself and for future children. I've just seen bad things happen, and I
What do you
want
mean?
to put
What do you
whatever
mean future
precautions in
children?
place.
Are you, and are you thinking? Wait, are you saying to? Let me ask you two questions. Are you saying protect
Yeah.
yourself, where you want to make sure that your husband doesn't take more money from you than you want to give him, or are you
Yes.
suggesting? Sorry.
Yes. But
Okay,
also other things.
and then yeah, and like, what do you mean by protect the children? And what other things would you think? Because that's what I'm curious. Meaning, do you? I guess I'll tell you why I'm asking this in a second. But what other things are you trying to protect?
I don't know. I think I've also been exposed to situations where someone is abusive. So I think that scares me also. And I never want to be in a situation where I'm stuck without any money and someone has access to like everything of mine and has the ability to take it away.
Fair. I understand what you're saying. I mean, when I say fair, I mean that came off wrong. I
No,
think I
it's
understand what you're saying.
complicated. It's
Yeah,
complex. And
yeah.
like I'm not a lawyer. I don't really have a legal background, which is why I would want to sit down with a lawyer. And like honestly, I'm 30 and so whenever I do find someone to marry, I'm not planning on getting divorced, but life happens and life is hard and bad things happen and sometimes people aren't who you think they are. And it's better to prepare for the worst situation when you're in a good state of mind
Yeah.
than try to like duke it out when everybody's angry and at their
Right.
worst.
And again, if it really does help, and more lawyers out there, family lawyers, like chime in. But if it really does help and make the process a lot easier, like if you have a robust prenuptial agreement that was well written by good attorneys, and both sides think, and it's fair, and it says clearly outright, like, okay, you know, that the one spouse should get $100,000, $10,000 every single month, regardless, deposited into their account the first day of the month, and it literally spells out every single thing. And they're going to get that. If you're married for more than 2 years, then it doesn't matter. Then they get $20,000 a month for every month for the next 5 years, whatever, right? 60 months. Let's say something like that was written down, and they had no children, this couple. My understanding is that their divorce would be so much quicker and smoother. And let's say like you put something in
Mhm.
there that they have to deposit the money into the person's account right when the person files for divorce, before they even divorce. I don't know what you could write in there. I'm not sure what you could do, but assuming you could do, like, get creative and like right away they got to do it. Or I don't know. You put some things that if they don't do it and we have to go to court, then there's $1 million penalty if they go against us. A $2 million penalty, right? So the reason why I'm saying things like that is so that in theory that other spouse could go to an attorney and say like, hey, like there's lots of money here. I'll be able to pay you when I be able to get this. And I think in family law, you're not allowed to take certain things on contingency. So I don't know how that would work, but maybe it would make it easier that or even for themselves, they could borrow money from other people, or I don't know, that they could, have more of a prize and a stick for the other person if they don't actually act that way. What you said before about like someone being abusive, even non-abusive, even put that aside, not being abusive. Let's just say a bad marriage. Like I almost like would if someone knows that, and then this could cut both ways, but if someone knows that they could get out of a bad marriage, right? Like if someone knows that they have an out and that they have money, and that I've heard even recently, someone was telling me that this person's staying married just for financial reasons, and that's sad. And if they knew that they could get out of a marriage, and be comfortable, maybe that's, I don't know, like, is that like, maybe they would feel like not trapped, and maybe that's good for their marriage. I don't know. Maybe it makes it too easy though if you have a prenup that you could just walk away. I don't know. These are, I guess, food for thought. I don't know.
Yeah, I
I
don't
go
know.
back and forth on it.
I think again, I am very swayed by my own experiences and what I've seen. And I mean, thank God I've never been in a bad type of situation like that, but I have seen it, and I had someone very close to me in a very bad situation, and she basically stayed in it because she felt like she was stuck, because she had no money, she had nothing. And it's really unfortunate. And when I saw that, I made myself a promise I would never put myself in that type I would never get myself into that kind of situation. So, I think when it comes down to it, I would want to put any precaution in place to protect myself.
Gotcha.
I mean,
No, fair.
I have a good career. I have a job, and like I don't know if this is like too personal, and like I'm sorry if the guy is listening, but I basically one of my exes, we he's the only guy I've gotten that serious with, that we talked about getting married and engagement and next steps. And he happened to have a career, he had his own company, and or he probably still does, he's not dead. But he has his own company, and he had certain amounts of income per year, and it was just something that he wanted to protect. And we had the discussion, and he told me that, like, if we did get married, he wanted me to sign a prenup. And I was in agreement with that, but I told him, like, I'm also gonna put my own stipulations in, and we really talked about certain things, and he he talked about, like, me taking time off of work to raise future children, and I brought up the point, like, "Okay, but you know that I'm X amount of years into my career, so, like, if I just take off 3, 4, 5 years of my career, like, that sets me back. So, like, you want me to sign a prenup to protect your business, but also, like, I need to put
Yeah.
stipulations in for myself to protect myself. Like, if God forbid we got divorced and I'm set back 5 years in my career, I could be making double what I would
No,
be
for sure.
making, then, like, I need to also have protection. So I think it's, like, it goes very deep, and we're getting, like, into numbers and deep legal stuff here, which we can backtrack from. But I think it's important that everyone, like, at least has that kind of conversation or can talk to a lawyer about it and just know that there are ways to protect themselves, both
But
financially,
even if you don't,
halakhically,
though,
everything.
just, but even if I just want to throw something out, even if you don't, though, if you don't have a prenup, then you go by New York, and so you wouldn't in that case scenario. I mean, I'm not exactly. Look, I don't. I'm a lawyer, but I don't know the law. There is some. You would get something necessarily, meaning, in theory, you'd get something, right? Meaning, you'd make that argument to a court, but then you'd have to go fight for it, and you'd have to go to court for it. I think the
Yeah.
concept here, and but there would be some kind of protections, right? You're maybe you get something, you'd say like, hey, I don't know how the court would look at it. You're go to a judge's mercy. Why put yourself through that? It was my thought process, right?
Yeah.
If the other side's okay with it, maybe it makes sense to just talk about that anyway. I will tell you that in thinking about it, I think if you do sign a prenup, and I never got married, I have never signed a prenup, but I can imagine that if someone would to sign a prenup, having thought about it, I think it makes you not necessarily partners per se, the same way as if you didn't sign a prenup, right? Meaning if one person's making more money than the other person, and the one person, let's say, is not working. Let's say in this case, the guy is not working, he's gonna be a stay-at-home dad, and the woman has a career and she's going out every day to work and he's raising the kids. If you sign that prenup where it says, let's say it says that he's just gonna get, but let's say he's going to get $50,000, $100,000 a year, whatever it is. And then the woman's career takes off. Let's say it did take off, didn't take off, whatever it is, takes off, and she starts making 20, $30 million a year. If that prenup still holds up and that guy's, you know, knows that if he leaves, he's going to get, pennies compared to what she has, he's going to probably feel really badly while they're married that, like, yeah, I'm not really a partner in this. I can't really get divorced. And like the money's more like hers. I don't know. I guess that just, whereas if they didn't have that prenup, always knows he could get divorced. He really is his partner because half that money is his. Go screw yourself. You have to treat me like an equal because I am an equal, and because if I left you, I would get half. And so if that's the case, right? Like, and so if that's true, then if that's really true that he would get half of what they made, then you know what? Then how is that? You know what I mean? How is that? If you get half of the money that you made while you're married to the other person, which is what I think the law is, right? Meaning if you're not working and the other person's working, and you get married, the money that he made, the other person gets half. Is my understanding. I could be way off. Forget about what happens in the future and alimony and maintenance. That's something different in terms of what you're making. But I think, and for how long? But that could be significant amount of money, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and signing a prenup could make you get less money. It can make you get more too, maybe, but it could make you get less, right? Typically, I think people want other people to sign prenups to contractually make them get less money. No,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert. I don't this is way outside my area of expertise.
yeah.
And again, like when the time comes, I want to sit with a lawyer and discuss what's the best move. But yeah, I see both sides. But conversely, like what if one spouse is just a bum and the other spouse is like, "Okay, I want to protect myself. I don't want to
Don't
give
marry
this
them.
bum money." But
You want to
yeah,
marry them
but
anyway?
people
Don't marry them,
change.
no.
People change.
So you want to marry the person thinking they're going to change, and then get a prenup to
No, no,
prevent
no,
it
no,
in
no,
case they
no,
don't.
no. I'm
Oh, you're
saying,
saying people change, they become a bum later. You mean?
yeah. So, I don't know. I think it's an interesting concept, but one thing that I coming back to so for the legal prenup, I think everyone should talk to a lawyer. Everyone should figure out what's best for them, what's best for their marriage and their future marriage and everything financially with their future spouse and with a lawyer. But what I do want to say is I think in our society, we need to normalize the halachic prenup. And even if you don't think that you're going to have an issue getting a get from someone, you should still sign a halachic prenup to normalize it. Because I think it needs to be a normalized thing. So more people, more women are protected. And it destigmatizes it. Most of the modern community is already like this. A lot of modern Orthodox rabbis will not even marry a couple without a halachic prenup.
But does it really
And
protect? I mean, maybe I caution to use that word help. Interjecting for a second, I don't know that necessarily the word protect. Like I wouldn't maybe fully protect would be a problematic statement. I think to say that. I think a halachic prenup is somewhat of a stick to try to help you get a get, but ultimately try not to marry guys that you don't think will give you a get, wouldn't give you a get, and guys give girls gets. Come on, that I think should be the message. Maybe more, more so.
yeah.
I'll also add this: none of this podcast should be. This is my legal disclaimer. None of this should be legal advice, but not providing legal advice. But the idea that I want to look more into halachic prenups, excuse me, and really understand them and see. Maybe I mean I'm sure the people who made them are really smart, and they were trying to do good. And I don't know, like maybe I think that there is a dollar amount, and maybe now with all inflation, maybe we should raise that dollar amount. I don't know why it was set where it was, and I would love
I
to see
think
what
it
the success rate is
I
for
wanna say
actually
it
collecting.
has I wanna say it has to do like, if it gets raised above a certain amount, I wanna say it, like, does
Comes.
something to, like, nullify the ketubah, but I could
Mm,
be totally wrong. Anybody, you're more than welcome to send me a message and correct me, but, again, I do think they help, they're there for a reason. It doesn't hurt to sign one,
yeah,
so
there you
just
go.
adding that extra layer that might help you in the future, so I just wanna reinforce that, and again, men give gets. Women, if don't marry a guy who you think is gonna not give a get. But
Yeah,
also, you never know. Weird true
yeah, that's
colors
true.
come out and ugliness comes out later on. So gets should not be used as bargaining chips and
Like that.
free
And
all
let's
the
not blame the
agunas.
victim. It's not. Oh, don't marry a guy who's not going to give you a get. But I'm not blaming the victim here. But
Yeah.
yeah,
But this has been a really interesting discussion. So thank you for
thank you.
discussing. Okay, so Robert, before we end the podcast, can you give me and my listeners one piece of dating advice?
Yeah, okay. Like going with the theme of first off, thank you for having me on. My one piece of dating advice would be try to put yourself in the other person's shoes.
It's a good piece of dating advice. And I
Yeah, I
think
think that's a good piece of advice for life too. And I'm, you're gonna fail all the time, but just if you try to have that mindset. I'm trying also. This is not the pot calling the kettle black. I'm trying very hard.
it's good. It's a good piece of advice, and I can definitely learn from it as well. Okay, Robert. So, last but not least, what is your Real Housewife tagline?
Okay, so having done my homework, I would say I'm I'm different and extra, but I'm okay with that because that's me. And I'm
I
not
like
okay
it.
with that. I'm great with that. I'm happy with that.
I like it. Being different and
Thank you
extra
so
is great.
much. Yeah,
Of course.
that
Thank
just
you
means
so
extra and
much.
different is just that's what's special. I don't want to be normal. I'm happy being special.
Yeah. It's more fun that way.
Fair, fair. Thank you so much, and thank you to your listeners. This was great.
Of course. Thank you so much for showing up. And thank you so much for coming to be a
Yeah,
guest on the podcast. And Sticky Situation Nation, you'll catch me next time. Bye, everybody.